Fuck! My name is Josh Miller. I own Riverstone Kennels, and I've been training gun dogs for more than 16 years. I have field trialed, I've hunt tested, but at the end of the day, I'm a duck hunter. You might find that the duck in our Duck Dogs podcast is spelled uniquely. The UK stands for my British Labs. I love my British Labs. I love what they offer me, both as a part of my family and the high motor in the field. As you're going to find, I have some pretty special dogs. Follow along in our podcast series here as we talk about both in the field hunting and in the field training situations that will hopefully help you progress with your dog at home. Hello and welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Duck Dogs. I'm your host, Josh Miller. Before we get going with our wonderful guest, I'm super excited about today. We need to go over and thank our wonderful sponsors for making this show possible. So thank you to DUK. DUK Premium Performance Sport 3020 is the blend of food that I currently feed my dogs, and I would highly recommend the Puppy Pro for any of you guys that are getting these young puppies or have puppies that are still developing. Just great, fantastic foods. If you're looking for a premium option to put your four-legged hunting partner on, www.yukanuba.com. Also, thank you to Sitka Gear. Sitka Gear is your premium option for outdoor clothing in the field. So I know we're transitioning out of the field into the training field, but the training field is still the field. So they have everyday wear that's going to keep you more comfortable for longer and, quite frankly, make you more productive with your dogs. So www.sitkagear.com. Also, thank you to Lucky Duck. Lucky Duck is your 5-star crash test rated kennel, both in the intermediate and in the large size. So no matter how big or small your four-legged hunting partner is, you can be sure that they're traveling as safe as they possibly can be. Also, with the fan, the cot, the cover, they have a wide array of products that will make sure that your dog is safe and comfortable. www.luckyduck.com. Also, thank you to Gun Dog Supply. Gun Dog Supply is your one-stop shop for all of your hunting and training needs for your four-legged hunting partner. I just cannot say enough good things about it. There's such few organizations that are geared specifically to what we're doing in the gun dog world, and Gun Dog Supply is one of those companies. Great people, great customer service. They're fantastic. www.gundogsupply.com. Also, thank you to Kent Cartridge. Kent is the shotgun shell of choice for us. We shot the Kent Bismuth loads all waterfowl season long. Now we're transitioning to the upland loads, and we've just had great success, with not only the shells, but again, the company in general. www.kentcartridge.com. Last but not least, thank you to Retriever Roadmap. Retriever Roadmap is your premium option for training your own dog at home. With a video-based library, a great community, one-on-one calls, for coaching. We just do everything we possibly can to make you and your dog successful. And for being a Duck Dogs listener, if you use the code DD100, DD for Duck Dogs, DD100 at checkout, you will get $100 off of your purchase of Retriever Roadmap. So go check out that. We're here back in the podcast studio here today, and as promised, this year I'm going to do, or at least attempt to do, more guests. That way, hopefully it's a little less boring than sitting here listening to me talk to the wall for an hour. But I'm actually really excited about today because I'm fortunate enough to have not only someone who's become a very close and personal friend of mine, but someone who I truly regard as the best at what they do in our industry. And I think it's something that everyone listening can take something from and apply into your day-to-day training, your hunting scenarios. And so I think this is going to be absolutely fantastic. But thank you to Dr. Joe Spoo for joining us here today.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate that intro. Feelings are mutual.
Well, it's kind of been a fun. So I want to little bit go back because our friendship has, I think, really continued to develop over the last few years. But man, it was years ago now that we first really kind of hit it off and became close. And man, you have been nothing but a major asset to Whitney and myself. Whitney, especially on the puppy side of things. But man, there's been times that we have had dogs, we have had, whether it's injuries or health issues go on, that, we've had, vets that just can't figure it out. And within a 20-minute phone call, with you, you have it dissected. So you're certainly, in my opinion anyway, the best at what you do. But give us a little background on yourself, your, veterinary background, kind of, where'd you start and how did you end up where you are today?
Sure. So grew up in Northwest Iowa at the corner of the Prairie Pothole region, and so grew up hunting basically since I was before I ever was in school. I was in the front of a duck boat, and only thing I ever wanted to be was a veterinarian. And so no race car driver or fireman or policeman. It's always wanted to be a veterinarian. Um, from there, went to school at Iowa State, and then had visions of Gordon McQuarrie's old Duck Hunters Club and divers in the Northwoods, and so moved up to northern Minnesota, and quickly realized that I'm not a in the trees sort of guy, and miss the wide open spaces. And so I wanted to practice someplace that had a lot of hunting dogs, and Sioux Falls kind of fit checked a lot of boxes. It had an emergency clinic, so I could quit taking call, and then was obviously out here where everything I love to do in the outdoors is. And so I've been out here in South Dakota for I think we're going on 21 years, 22 years, out here in South Dakota. As part of that, that same time, almost 25 years ago, I started the website gundogdoc.com, and more as a consulting business and an information, to dog owners, to hunting dog owners. But basically, my entire career has been devoted to hunting dogs and bettering our knowledge and hopefully bettering their lives. And so that kind of snowballed into becoming a board certified specialist in sports medicine and rehabilitation. My wife is also a veterinary specialist, and we grew a practice out here in the Dakotas. And a few years ago, we're fortunate enough to sell that practice, but still continue to practice in that facility. And then I've expanded kind of some of the offerings on the Gun Dog Doc side, trying to educate people just about how special and unique these hunting dogs are. And then over the course of the last 20 plus years, I've dabbled in all the different, breeds and venues that these guys compete in. So, I personally have setters, I've had retrievers, spaniels. I helped start the local NAVDA club. And so just kind of dabbled in all of it, whether helping others or owning the dogs myself as well.
Mm. Yeah, and that's one of the things that to me, have found so unique in what you do, because there are a lot of great veterinarians out there, but it seems like very few and far between that specifically focus on sporting dogs.
Yeah, I'd agree with that statement. And it's interesting to me because I think the other side of it too is that there's a number of veterinarians that hunt and have hunting dogs. And for whatever reason, they're very good veterinarians, but just haven't taken that leap into, taking care of the dogs that do the activities with them. It's a new field. And so, the specialty college, has only been around for, 10 to 15 years. And so, while physical therapy and sports medicine has been on the human side for forever, we really lagged behind in veterinary medicine. And I mean, it wasn't a thing when I was in school. We weren't taught these sort of principles and things like that. And quite honestly, before it became a possibility to get board certified in veterinary medicine, most people, got PhDs or advanced degrees on the human side. And I was actually in a human performance nutrition PhD program at about the time the specialty college became a thing, and I switched gears and went down the path to become board certified. But it really wasn't a part of veterinary medicine, up until the last 10 to 15 years, that we kind of look at these dogs as true athletes and start employing some of the principles, whether it be conditioning, nutrition, injury recovery that have been on the human side for forever. It's a relatively new field in veterinary medicine.
Mm. Well, and one, I think that's incredibly interesting from the newness standpoint, right? Because we've always we talk about the history of these dogs and how the breeds came to be and what they were used for, and obviously they've been used in these areas for such a long time. But one thing that really interests me is, would you say that there is a pretty significant difference of how you approach or how you handle giving care to an athlete? I love that you use that term because that's how we look at them. An athlete and a sporting dog versus a a Shih Tzu or a Bulldog, that comes in. I mean, are those dogs, no two dogs are created equal? Would you kind of take that approach on that?
Yeah, absolutely. And but the flip side, or what I would say, is I think it's similar on the human side, right? Like I think a lot of the principles that we have for super high end care, say coming out of the orthopedic clinics out of Aspen, and we're athletes, that all trickles down. And so it's one of those things that those principles that I'll apply to get a dog out into the field and back and doing what they love are then when I do see that those other breeds of dogs, I don't say it's almost easier, but my job's easier because instead of having that dog compete at high end field trial levels, I just need that dog to go out to the bathroom and come back in from outside. And so it is, they're definitely, goals and outcomes are different, but I think being able to use the techniques that we use for these high end athletes do benefit those other patients, because you end up, some of those, trying to solve those bigger problems end up benefiting, a lot of those pet dog owners as well. So I think they definitely, that patients are treated individually and differently, but there is some crossover that you end up utilizing, because it's like, if I can accomplish that goal with this athlete, I certainly should be able to accomplish that goal, with the dog that's just a companion dog that just needs to be able to go outside to go to the bathroom.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, but would you say more difficult the other way around? And so one of the reasons I'm kind of asking this question is
Mhm.
I feel like it's so important that when someone is looking for a vet, right? Because we all want to have vets that we can trust, that we can go to and feel very confident that we're getting the best care that we can. Um, how important do you think it is to find a sporting specific vet? You talked about how, you treating the high end athletes, how that makes, what, from what it sounds like, maybe a smoother transition to the dog that's not necessarily the athlete, but vice versa. I have to imagine that's a more difficult transition.
Oh, 1,000%. Yeah. If we're asking that way, not like in my hands, but finding for that person that isn't coming to see me. Yeah, 1,000%. I think it's again, and I don't want to say that it's other veterinarians' fault. It's that a lot of people were not trained, and they still, there's schools that don't have sports medicine programs, don't look at these dogs as athletes. It's kind of like all patients are the same, and that's clearly not the case. And so having um, somebody with that eye that understands and can look at your dog that way. I think that the other thing too, and I'll notice it as we've hired associates over the years, that dogs that I'll get out in the field, they'll look at me like I'm crazy, because it's oh, they need to be on the bench for 14 days while that heals, or we can't do those sort of things. And I don't look at cases that way, right? I'm yes, we may delay the healing, but we're not going to cause any permanent damage. So let's get that dog back out in the field mentality. That veterinarians, just as a matter of course, don't. And so it's on two levels. I think it's that level where having an eye towards a performance athlete and how you treat them differently is important. And then I think the other side too is, there's an interesting phenomenon within this profession that I've never quite understood, but a lot of veterinarians are intimidated by knowledgeable dog owners, whether that be trainers or hunters or dog breeders. There's a stigma, that they make bad clients, and so making sure that you have a veterinarian that clicks with what you're doing with your dog is important, but then also understanding, the level of athleticism that these dogs have, I think, is important. And it's two big hurdles, I think, in this profession for people in your shoes and people listening to this, to find that veterinarian that checks both those boxes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no doubt. Well, and so sticking on the veterinary side of things, looking for a vet. One of the things that I really try to preach being proactive and having this at your fingertips for the in case emergency. And I'm fortunate enough to have you to where I probably bug you way too much, with this stuff as I'm traveling. But for someone that is going to travel with their dog, one of the things I always talk about is, if you know you're going to be in this area, find 1 to 2 to 3 vets that in case of emergency you can go to. It's an emergency clinic. They're in close proximity. You can get somewhere fast. Are there credentials that you could give us as far as, like, when you're traveling, this is what you as a customer would look for when you're searching? Okay, I'm going to be in St. Louis, Missouri area. where are the best vets, the closest vets, the vets that fit me? What would you do to kind of dissect that, to have that information at your fingertips? Heaven forbid you need it in a hurry.
Yeah, I'll be the first to say it's a tough one, simply because you know, I think for a long time we thought, everything's equal. A vet's a vet, a doctor's a doctor, a mechanic's a mechanic, and as we've become a more mobile and informed society, I think we realize that that's not the case. And so, in an ideal world, you'd have, when dealing with sporting dogs, a diplomat of American College of Veterinary Sports Medicine and Rehabilitation. The reality is there aren't a lot of us out there, and even fewer of us in private practice. And so then it becomes sometimes like picking apart the practice and a doctor's bio. And so, a practice that's AHA certified is going to meet a level of criteria that other practices may not. And so if I was going to, a city I was unfamiliar with, our town, that would be something that would catch my eye. With athletic dogs, things like people that are interested in rehab and have some of those certifications. And there's two. The CCRT is one, and then the other one from the University of Tennessee program escapes me right now. But there are two rehab certifications. The other thing I do is really look at a doctor's bio and experience level on the site. While it's no guarantee, that the vets that have a broad interest, that whether it be internal medicine, injuries, surgeries, somebody that appears to really be engaged in the profession versus someone that maybe has their bio that's a new grad and enjoys wellness visits and dentals. They're probably not going to have that skill set or want to have the skill set to dig into an athletic dog and things like that. And so it's tough. And that's I think we've been through that scenario, right, where you'll call and I'll look at a practice in the area and try to decipher, these are the people I'd try to get to, or this is the facility I'd try to get to. But it's those standards qualities, and then kind of digging into what their bio says. If it's somebody that enjoys athletic dogs and internal medicine and surgeries, and they enjoy hunting on the weekends, that's going to be maybe someone that you want to think about. The flip side is that a lot of us end up hunting in rural areas where we might not have those choices, and you end up in the hands of a mixed animal practitioner that, and I think it's important in those situations to understand too, like, are we just stabilizing something until we can get to somebody with more experience, or is this an emergency that I have to trust this individual? And so it's a tough one. Like, there aren't black and white, like these are the things. But for me, it's looking at the facility. Are they AHA certified? Which not everybody's going to be, and it's not an automatic negative if they're not. And then kind of digging into their bios, and do they seem passionate about veterinary medicine? Um, because it's something that I thought, everybody that goes to vet school loves animals, and wants to take care of them and be really good at this. And it's not the case. I mean, just like in the dog training world, right? Like, there's trainers that probably think, why in the hell are you doing this? You don't appear to enjoy it and enjoy the dogs, but for whatever reason, this is the career path they chose. So it's really dissecting, the clinics and the doctors at those clinics would be the big thing I would suggest.
Hmm. Well, I think that's such valuable information, especially because everything you talked about, it is going to take a little bit of time, to dig into it, whether that's making the plan, like you talked about, of, hey, I'm not anywhere near where I want to be, but here is my option A in order to get to where I really want to get to. But going through the profiles, looking at that, that's all going to take time. And so doing this before you hit the road, right, and just being prepared, I just think it is by far the best way to approach a trip, to approach a training, whether you're hunt testing or field training on the road. It's so much better to do that in ahead of time than in the moment. Your stress level is going to be through the roof. You're not wanting to go through all these websites and read those profiles and take that time. And heaven forbid you use it, right? But I can tell you, the few times I've had to use it, I'm really glad that I did that homework ahead of time rather than in that moment.
Oh, 1,000%. And you're right, because you add stress to a situation, and you're not going to make your clearest decisions, right? You just want to solve the problem or think you're solving the problem. And so sometimes it's the quickest, easiest versus the right. And if you haven't done that research, you're gonna tend to be more of a dice roll, right? You're going to find somebody and go with that versus going with maybe what was your best option.
Hmm. And it's so funny to hear you say that the stigma that trainers and breeders don't make the best clients. I totally get that because we as a profession, especially trainers, we all tend to think we know about everything, and really we're very uneducated most of us in this area, even though we have our opinions. And so when I was actually down at our pheasant ranch in Missouri, I was trying to find, hey, where's a really close option? I knew my best emergency options were going to be in St. Louis. You and I had talked about that, and you kind of dialed me into, hey, here's who I would look at and why. But there's a little town that had this little vet clinic on Main Street, and I was going through the town. I was like, look, this would be a 10-minute tops to get here if I had to. So I swung in there and met the lady at the front desk, which was the vet's wife. So a husband and wife kind of ran the practice, it looked like. And so I walked in there and I introduced myself and I said, I'm going to be down this area for about a month or two, and just need to have somewhere that I can take my vet, my dog to a vet if they. And it was like, yeah, that's great. We'd love to work with you. And then all of a sudden I got into what I'm doing as far as these dogs are athletes. I train gun dogs. I breed these, and it was like their facial expressions just changed. And she's like, we might not be the best one for you. And they were so nice about it, but it was very much of like, but you know what? I would rather find that out, then
Correct.
than, in that moment. And so, I was very obviously fitting that stigma that you talked about during that conversation.
Yeah, it's nuts. It's nuts to me though, that like because I appreciate knowledgeable clients, right? Because you're coming to me for an expertise you don't have, and that's why you're there. And I should have that, versus I think there's that intimidation. Well, maybe this person knows better. And kind of my press back on that is, at the end of the day, to do dog training right, you're only handling a handful of dogs at a time, right? Which might be the number of dogs I see in one day for medical issues. And so my health knowledge better be much higher than yours. It's because you're working with that same dog day after day to make it better. I'm working with a huge sample of dogs with specific health issues, and I for whatever reason, people can't make that mental leap. But it's I always say you can train a monkey to do vaccines and pull heartworm preventative. It's that next level knowledge that we all went to school for. And having that discussion with somebody that knows what they're talking about is so much more fun than someone that doesn't have a clue or is completely lost. And so that educated owner is fun for me, and but for whatever reason in the profession, a lot of people like to shy away from the educated owner. So
Well, I'd say a big reason because you're very good at what you do. You're not going to be intimidated, by that. But what you said there about seeing so many dogs in a day, that hit me because I have a few of my good friends that are trainers and I think do a great job, and we kind of balance. It's great to have that little circle because I think
mhm,
none of us really have the ego to where we feel like we know it all, right? So we run into a hiccup or hang up. We have this group text and we text each other and we hey, anybody ever seen this, or what do you think of that? And I actually think it's great. I think just putting our ego aside, but then inevitably once in a great while, we'll start talking about different threads that somebody saw specifically on Facebook and social media, and it's hey, how do I get my dog through this? And there's 140 comments, and inevitably one of the guys is like, these guys are so opinionated, and hey, this is the only way to do this. You have to do this. That doesn't work. That person, I bet he's only trained one dog in his life. Like train 100 dogs and then come back and have an opinion. And as much as I agree with that, I think what you just said takes it to another level as far as like you may see that many dogs in a day, and so
right.
the number of dogs that experience I think goes a long way just from the expertise standpoint, right? Because I mean I've been a part of dogs that my local vet here, who I do believe is very good, that they've like, gosh, like we've never seen this or gone through this before, and we kind of get through it together, and then now they have that expertise then to go forward and use that again. So
Right.
numbers is always a big thing, right?
Absolutely.
So what I want to get into is I want to get into what I consider some frequently asked questions, whether that's coming through the show and the podcast here, or social during hunting season or training season or what have you. And I think there are a few of them that really stand out to me that I'd love to get your expertise on, because these are often questions that, quite frankly, I don't have a great answer for all the time. And maybe that's because maybe my answer is just as great as it's going to be. Although I'm going to guess that you're going to have a much greater answer than I've had in some of these. So so the first one I want to dig into, we're coming out of a season that, although up here in the north, it never got as cold as what we've been used to. I mean, shoot, I don't think I've ever in my life been through December, January, February with no snow on the ground here in Wisconsin. It's absolutely wild. But in Arkansas, very different, because we got so cold. We had, to the point that I just packed up and went home at the end of the season. But there was a lot of cold weather hunting, a lot of ice, a lot of situations that, to be quite frank, I couldn't believe that I heard and saw people pushing dogs through some of these situations. So the first one I want to get into is when is too cold? And then, we can hit the flip side of this is when it's too hot as we head into training season. But when you look at, cold weather hunting, when are you saying, hey, this is too cold?
Yeah. And so I kind of cover both at the same time, because I do think that they play off of each other, and we can kind of come back to the heat. But my issue with the heat, and it's kind of my soapbox issue, is a dog will hunt itself to death in the heat. And I think that that's where I, talk about that a lot. And quite honestly, up until the last couple of years, I didn't address the cold side of things because I don't see it as much of an issue. Like, and the reason for that is, you have take that same dog that will literally hunt itself to death in heat stroke, and you won't see the symptoms until the dog's in trouble if you're not paying attention. And take that dog in a cold situation, and I think dogs tell you when it's cold. They're like, screw this, like, it's too cold. They start refusing cast. They won't even make the retrieve. I think there's more warnings that come into it. And so I've never been that worried about the cold, simply because I think the dog will tell you, not because cold doesn't affect dogs and that you can't end up with the dog, in a problem. I feel like dogs are, they shut down in the cold when it starts getting to those temperatures. And so historically, I haven't been as worried because, living in the north part of the country too, I mean, there's some cold times that we'll hunt these dogs where wind chills, might be below zero, and it's miserable out. But I think it's one of those, if you're willing to be out and the dog seems like they're willing, it's I don't have those dogs get into trouble as much as dogs in the heat. And so what I look for in that situation is the dog's willingness, does it want to? And then I'm hyper conscious of, getting that dog out of the water, making sure they're not sitting in the wind. And I'm pretty neurotic about keeping my eye on their attitude. Do they want to be there? Can they do it? And at the instant that dog is like maybe not having fun, or they just look uncomfortable, then I'm shutting the hunt down. With the retrievers, I haven't gotten into that much trouble if I take that path with them. Upland dogs is a different story. I have a buddy that runs pointers, and we've had a couple of times where, when those dogs are moving and they're generating heat, they're fine. But like, you get to an end of a field and you decide what path you're going to take back to the truck, and that pointer stops and he's wet from the snow and that wind starts hitting him. And like, I've had my buddy's pointers just instantly where you're like, oh crap, this dog's going to be in trouble if we don't get him warmed up and back right away. Same with, like, the setters or cockers when their coat gets wet. And if they stop in the wind, then those dogs can get miserable pretty fast. But I don't think we see the issues with hypothermia like we do with heat stroke, because I think people are aware. And to your point, right? It was an abnormal week or 2 week stretch down there where you're like, it's just not fit for my dog. And so you don't put him in it. And so I think it's one of those that people are just more aware of when the conditions get rough on the cold side, where it's just easier to get a dog in trouble in the heat. And so with the heat, I have some temperatures and things that will be cautionary for me. On the cold side, I think it's really like reading the dog and your conditions. Because there's times that 10 degrees with no wind can feel warm in this part of the country. And 10 degrees with a 30-mile-an-hour north wind, can feel like the most miserable temperature you've ever been in. And so it's those sort of things I think that with the cold that a person really has to factor in, um, and just really watch your like your dog will give you clues in the cold, and that's I'd be interested in your experience, right? Like when you were down there, what's the dog's attitude like when those days you thought it was going to be cold? What were the dogs like?
Hmm. Yeah, and I actually had a situation like this to where we went out and we hunted. We had a big group of people, so there was a bunch of retrieves going on. And I had Tucker, who I don't think you've ever met Tucker, but you've met Brock, of course.
Uh-uh.
And so Tucker would be a son of Brock's full sister. So very similar personality, motor, everything else. And I mean, this is a dog that's on his toenails all the time. And about
Right.
retrieve 15 or so, I mean, I sent him back and he never moved. And I
Yeah.
kind of looked. His tail was kind of drooped down. His head, he wasn't on his toenails like he always is, and that was my sign. And so from that point, I shut it down. And I brought him in, put a jacket on him. He warmed right back up to where he wanted to go back out, but I shut it down from there, just trying to not push it too far or get in a situation where we were going to be in a bad spot. But that had a lot to do with reading the dog. And there was a guy actually in the blind with us that you had kind of asked me, why aren't you sending him back out then? I told him why, and the risk just is not worth the reward in this. I mean,
Right.
worst case scenario, we get in the boat and we go pick him up ourselves. Yeah, it's not as fun, but the same side, we go back with a happy, healthy dog versus scrambling potentially otherwise. And he had made the comment that he watched a dog go into hypothermia at one point, and it was simply because the handler in that same situation where Tucker didn't go, the handler took it as a refusal, used the collar and forced him back into the water, and like to the point that the dog was hardly moving in the water and you could tell the body was just shutting down. So
Yeah.
for me, it's the same thing, right? Like you as a handler, you have to be the more intelligent person in this situation, right? Like you have to shut them down. I totally agree that the heat scares the heck out of me. I mean, we are so cautious of it during training. Of course, we're not in the South, and we don't have to deal with it nearly like they do
Right.
down there, quite frankly, like you do out in the Dakotas. But we're still super cautious of it because in my experience, when I've seen dogs go into that heat stroke stage, it's like it hits them right, and like once they're
Yeah.
there, I mean, trying to get them back out of it, it just seems like it's a complete scramble. And then I mean, it's not a fun thing to watch either. The wobble, the
No.
disorientation, and then just completely out of it. Um, and so the heat, like, are there certain things that you're specifically looking for as far as like, is it, the long tongue? Is it, the gums turning white? Like, what's your really tell sign of like, hey, we need to start, throttling things back or just shut it down?
Yeah, and I think that it even starts before then in like being aware of the environment, right? Like there's times, especially like you start talking summer or spring training when you get that green grass and it's a little more suffocating, where you might be standing up above the grass and you're getting a cool breeze hitting you. It's appreciating where that dog is, because if that dog's in cover, it can be stifling and almost smothering. And so understanding like, okay, what am I asking this dog today, and what are the conditions I'm putting them in that maybe are going to accelerate that. So I think even starting there before I even cut the dog loose is, is it hotter for him, than it is for me up here, understanding that. And then I think humidity is a big one. And kind of my danger zone is if I add the temp and humidity together and they're in that 150 ballpark, I get super cautious. And I've never owned a heat tolerant dog. And like I've trained with guys, that have very heat tolerant dog. I've never been fortunate to do that. So we get into that 150 ballpark, and I'm usually not running the dogs. And that sounds like a high number, but we get some of those 60-degree mornings in the summer, which should be relatively cool, but with 97% humidity, and we've hit that. We're up in that 160 ballpark, right? And so it's being aware of, am I setting this dog up to struggle before I even release them? And then for the monitoring side, it's the things that you say. That tongue starts getting really long and wide because that's how they're trying to dissipate heat. And so it's almost like they're trying to remove their tongue from their mouth. And so, it's a different pant, it's a different movement than that dog that's just warm or excited. And then they start getting that really ropey saliva because they're not swallowing because they're trying to move as much air as possible. And so they just get that thick, ropey saliva all over. And then it's that look in the eyes. And like if you've ever seen it, like it just like it's an oh crap moment when you see a dog that's overheating and they have that I'm in trouble look. And it's scary. Like, and so those are the big things. If I can see that tongue starting to change, the saliva, and any sort of change to their mental state, it's getting them cooled down right away. But I try to avoid, it's we've all been there. It's if you run dogs, you're going to get a dog hot, and so the more experience you have with it, oftentimes you can head it off so that you're not having to institute those emergency cooling protocols. And that's where I think, like, to your point, with the Tucker story, he gave you those clues, right? Where you knew something was different. And that's why I think with the cold, why I don't get as worried about it, because if you're observant of your dog, they're going, it wasn't like with heat stroke where he's like, oh my God, boss, I'm so cold. Like, we got to go back to the truck. You just need to shut him down and warm him up. And like you said, he was ready to go. Where heat stroke is like, they will hunt up to the point of collapse. And that's what scares me so much about heat stroke. And so trying to not put them in the situation and then recognize when a dog's getting hot, because they won't stop. Like with heat stroke, they won't. They'll refuse to go into cold. They'll shut down with the cold, but with heat stroke, they will go right up to the point of seizing. I've seen these dogs do. So,
Hmm. Yeah, I think the big thing for me anyway, as a hunter, the big thing that I always look for in the cold weather is what is your exit strategy, right? Because there are oftentimes,
right,
like for us, like we're talking, it's a, you know, 30-minute boat ride. And then after that, you got, a 15-minute walk or whatever it is. Like that is not going to be a real ideal, situation if you were to get to that point to get them out of there and get somewhere safe, right? And so,
right,
that's what I really try to make everyone aware of, that side of it, of just like, what's your exit strategy? So to your point, from a cold side of it, you and I had talked about this actually. This was years ago now, but it was Solo's first real hunt out in Montana. Like I think we were like -42, but where we were sitting, we were out of the wind, and it was a warm water creek, and I was able to keep my truck running about 60 yards behind us, and we were all good. We had heaters going in the blind, and like you said, like it's crazy how it can be so cold, but yet it doesn't feel that cold. And maybe it might have been more like -30 or something like that, but still crazy cold, right?
sure,
And I mean, all that I did is rotate, right? So it was like you
right,
pick up the two birds and you rotate, and these dogs are like toasty warm every time they come in and out. But obviously that's an extreme situation, but it's also an extreme example of like extreme cold, but great exit strategy and great rotational strategy to where we never ran into a problem. But then
yep,
on the flip side, we've had times where it's you know 15 degrees, 20 degrees, and it just feels way more dire, way more like, hey, we don't want to push this, we shouldn't be here. And so I think exit strategies is huge. And then going back to the heat side of it, could you touch a little bit on water, because I do feel like there's this maybe misconception that, hey, if it's hot, we'll just go to water and that makes everything better.
yeah, and you're right. Like I'll never forget. I was doing relief work at a clinic in Northwest Iowa, and had a pro trainer bring a dog in that right he had died in the field, and like the temperature of the dead dog was still like off the charts on the thermometers, and he kept saying that. He goes, I thought he was wet, I thought he was fine, I thought he was wet, I thought he was fine. And come to find out, they were training in splash water on a 100-degree day in this part of the country. I mean, it's like running a dog in a hot tub. um, and so it is like wet does not necessarily equal cool. It's different if you're training in a northern Wisconsin lake where you got deep water and it's cool, versus some of this splash water stuff, and it just scares me. Because a lot of technical water and things like that are smaller bodies of water that people have constructed, and so you don't have a lot of depth and coolness to it, and so you get into the summer months, in any part of the country, and I think being conscious of that water temperature, and every year we'll see, that where dogs die swimming, and the place I've seen it too is not just even training in the summer, but those early season fall hunts where we get hot days. someone gets a dog that's in the process of heat stroking and they decide, well, I'm just going to send that dog out to swim to cool down. And if that water's warm, then now you have a dog that's on the verge of heat stroke, put it into a water where it can't cool because the water temperature's high. And we've had dogs drowned because they got sent into the water, got hot, and then ended up, having the neurologic issues while they're out swimming, and they end up drowning from essentially heat stroke. And so I get really nervous, because it is a popular sentiment, that a wet dog's a cool dog, and it is just not always the case. Particularly with the stuff we have access to train dogs with, a lot of that water is shallow and can get super hot by the middle to the end of summer.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I just think that it's, again, the safe than sorry, route is always going to be, the best route here. And, it's one of those things that once in a while we'll get people that are like, well, what if you can't train early in the morning? What if you can't train, late in the evening? Quite frankly, it's, well, then I guess you're not training, or you're training inside. Maybe you're doing, some place
Right.
training in your living room, right? Like, it is just not worth, what the potential could be, by pushing them too far. Especially the heat just scares the heck out of me. I mean, if you have
Yeah,
ever
me
seen
too.
that side of it, it is a scary thing to see. Um,
Absolutely. And it's the dogs are like it is not a way for anybody to go.
mhm.
And that's probably where I think maybe my why it's one of my soapbox issues when I give my seminars, because we are responsible for it, right? Like they rely on us to protect them from themselves even. And man, it is. You would look into a dog's eyes that's suffering from heat stroke and trying to get them cooled down and things corrected, and it's a miserable situation that's caused by us. I mean, we allow it to happen, I guess, and so we're really responsible for preventing it.
That's an awesome point. And I think that's something everybody can empathize and feel, right? Because I mean, you put the dog in that situation. I mean, that's a handler error, a human error that made that. And I think that's so especially because, again, all of us that are listening are likely dog owners, right? Like, what Dr. Spoo is talking about here, right? Like, that dog looks at you for guidance, for leadership, and if you're not going to be strong enough leader to shut it down, then they're going to follow you into that danger. And ultimately, will come full circle. That's on you. And that's a really tough thing to have to swallow. I think that's why I feel like that the temperature thing, especially the heat side, it is such a great topic to touch on and dig into. Um, but so Joe, let's go into a conversation you and I were having just last week, and I want to go back to it just because I feel like there's a lot of value there, especially if someone's out there that is maybe looking for okay, what's my next dog? Maybe they're in the puppy search or the breed search, even more specifically, but finding the right breed for the job. And this was a conversation you and I got into because do you still have your cocker?
No, she passed away.
Okay. So you
So
had
speaking of puppy searches, that we will be having a cocker puppy in the house this summer. So
there you go. There you go. The little Energizer bunny, I'm sure. Um so okay, so but you had a great cocker. I currently have a great cocker, and they're fun dogs. They're great energy. It's hard not to just love life while you're around them because they kind of give that off. At the same side, you and I were having this conversation because it seems like on social media everybody wants something different, and everybody wants
right.
to show off of, like, look what this dog can do. Okay, so Alvin is my field cocker, and yeah, Alvin can go duck hunt, and he goes and retrieves hunts or retrieves mallards, and it is a fun thing to watch him go do that. But is he a duck dog? No, no. He's not he's not built for that job in a number of facets. So, could you kind of dig into? We were really in depth in this conversation. I wish we were recording it then, but finding the right breed for the job.
Yeah, and so I agree. So Lily was a great retriever. I used her. She was my predominant duck dog for the years that I had her, um, and was great at it to a point. And so the problem with them is size is one, and so you get a really strong wingtip mallard, and depending on depth of water and things like that, she wasn't always going to be able to swim that dog down or that duck down. And then back to our just the conversation we were having on heat and cold. she also, because of their coat, they're not designed for late season hunts, and so she would usually hunt with me through the first week or two of November, and then I'd shut her down, and I would not put her in those situations late season where hypothermia would have been a potential issue with her, even vested up. And so it's one that, like, I there were times that she could hunt in colder water, but it was kind of like you said, if I had a truck right by, or if it was, but she wasn't built for late season duck hunting, and that's, I had a Chessie before her. She kind of bridged to my next retriever. We have a lab now as well. And I will never be without a cocker. I think they're one of the funnest breeds ever, but they aren't the do it all dog like you say on social media. It's one that, the Boykin's the other one too, that everybody thinks that they're a great duck dog, and perhaps down south where we don't have those colder temperatures, both of those breeds would probably be okay. But the colder temperatures, they just do not have the coat, and in the bigger birds, and I do have pictures. Like, Lily at 26 pounds, retrieved some pretty big geese in her day. But it wasn't, like, she wouldn't have been a dog that you'd go out in field hunt with 3 or 4 guys, with great big honkers. I mean, I don't want to say it was a sideshow, but if I dropped a honker in water, she'd have no problem with that. And then we have a metro season here where there's usually, when the geese are flying, there's a lot of snow on the ground, and she could position herself to get those geese back if there was snow on the ground. But it's just, it's very difficult, I think, to find that, like, true do it all dog that everybody wants to paint their breeds to. And that's, and I know we can't all own multiple dogs, but honestly, it's the reason I have, in the past or currently had setters, retrievers, and spaniels, because I do think they're really good at certain jobs, and not as good at other jobs. And I'm sure that there's people listening that will jump right in with the versatile discussion. And, it's, I would say the same there. Like, there's going to be some decent versatiles that at certain times of the year could do certain jobs very, very well, but day in and day out, year round, they're not going to match up with a specialist in those breeds. Is kind of my take on it.
Yeah, I could not agree more. And I'm in the same boat, right? So I have cocker, I have my setters, and I have my Labradors, which of course is our main breed. And one of the things that especially down with the pheasant ranch now, being upland hunting a lot, you guys are like, well, like, my lab will do this, or my, and what's interesting. So Alvin is kind of like the hit down there, right? Like, everybody loves seeing this little dog, with all this motor, all this energy, and especially if I have to go send him on a blind because he'll handle like a retriever. Right? Like, people just love it.
Mm-hmm.
But I believe the reason people love it so much is because they're seeing a dog in the element that he was meant to be in, right? Like,
Right.
he's at home, where we are, where, the labs, which are doing a great job, they're quartering, they're flushing, they're retrieving, they're doing everything they're supposed to do. It's just with a little different, pizzazz on it, right? Where, again, you bring Alvin into a duck blind. Yeah, it's going to be fun to watch. He's going to do his thing, but it's not going to be the same level of impressiveness. And I was talking to a guy about this here last week, and what I told him is, the way that I see it, it's kind of like if you took 2 very talented athletes, say basketball players, and both were great shooters, great footwork, great everything, but one was 7 feet tall and the other one was 5'6". Like, one of those guys is going to excel more in that sport, right? And that's the reality of what we're dealing with here. Like, can Alvin go do it? Absolutely, and he'll do it with all the energy and all the effort and all the heart. But you put him next to Brock, and it's in a different ballpark. But then you bring those two in the upland field, and you'd say the same thing, vice versa. Can both do it? All, absolutely, but they do it differently. And quite frankly, I feel the same way about the versatile breeds, which I know you have a tremendous background in, with starting NABD out there, helping start that NABD club out there in Sioux Falls. But when I get people that want to bring up the versatile conversation, as far as like, well, why wouldn't I have a dog that just does it all? Is one, I just don't believe, having trained a lot of them, and I've trained, I mean, shoot, one of my absolute best ever horseback field trial dogs with a short hair named Pancakes. I don't know if I've ever talked about Pancakes on this, but he was not my dog. He was a client dog, but he was a awesome dog. But there was a dog that was way more pointer than he was retriever, right? Like this dude did not care to retrieve, but he was one of the best pointers that you could find. So my thing is like, as far as a versatile breed, like, if you want a pointer, to me, like those versatile breeds are likely not going to be the pointing dog that a setter and English pointer is, and they're certainly not going to be the retriever more than likely that a Labrador or a Golden or a Chessie is going to be, right? So like you're not getting the best of both worlds, and I think that's the misconception. Now, if it's the right breed for you, and hey, I don't need an all-star at both, I just need a dog that can do both, to some level. That's great. And I get it. I know I'm irritating somebody out there because somebody's got a versatile dog right now that's cussing at me going like, my dog does. And that's great. But we're talking, generally speaking, overarching, to me, the analogy, I don't know why I've always used this, but I have, like, you're not getting the front end of a Corvette and the back end of a Super Duty and saying like, this is the best all around ever vehicle. Right. And so, there's definitely those strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah. And I think to kind of expound on that, to cool the anger that maybe people have right now is exactly that. Like, I have a tremendous number of versatile dogs in the practice, and they're ideal for those owners because it to your point, it's guys that maybe duck hunt a couple of times out of the year, but mostly are chasing pheasants, and once in a while, go out and chase prairie birds. And so that versatile dog for them is ideal. I think where I see the problem exacerbated is the person who does only one kind of hunting in that's all they do, and then but not get the dog designed for that type of hunting, and then they have frustrations. And so like it's inevitable that I'll have clients because their buddies have wire hairs that they get a wire hair, and then they want the dog to hunt at 20 yards, and they tell the dog to flush, and I'm like, it's just not the dog you should have got. Just because your buddies have that dog, like your style of hunting would be great for a Springer or a Cocker, because you're not even letting the dog hold the point. In same with on the duck hunting side, where I see, people that predominantly duck hunt not go with a retriever, and it's you're just setting yourself up for potential problems. And like you said, you could get that non-traditional dog that maybe excels at it, versus if you get the traditional dog, you're really likely going to get something that excels at it. And I think that, like the versatile dogs have their place on the people who, dabble in all of it and can only have one or two dogs. And there are times where I tell people, especially out here in South Dakota, like the wire hair's the dog that you should get because they do fit that bill. It's when we start talking about specialized tasks, or if that's the only type of hunting you're doing, if I hunted prairie grouse, a Labrador would not be my first choice of primary dogs. But have I shot a lot of grouse over flushing dogs? Absolutely. And I think that's, it's the one or two dog owner that specializes in their outdoor pursuits that I think, really can get swayed by some of these, breed advocates that aren't necessarily doing a service to their breed or to the people looking, unfortunately.
Yeah, totally. Well, and the one that gets me is, when you start kind of digging into, well, what led you to this breed, and the comment is, well, I just wanted something different. Like that's not the reason to get a breed of dog, right? There's a reason. I just had a conversation not too long ago with a guy, super nice guy, going through Train to Retrieve, through Retrieve Roadmap, and he's done this same program before with two labs, and now he's doing it with a Springer. He's like, gosh, this dog just is not going through this the same. And I'm like, well, why would you expect him to? Right? Like this is a different dog. You're not getting a different looking, Labrador, but I'll tell you what, that Springer's going to have, different strengths than what those labs had, right? So you just have to go through it knowing, hey, I'm coaching a different team now. This is a little different approach. And so, yeah, I totally agree. This is where I believe when you are on your puppy search, just being honest with yourself. What is it that I need? What am I looking for, right? And probably the hardest thing that, especially us guys, deal with is that we go through a phase, and I'm going into it right now, where, all right, so I've hunted 90 plus days every year of basically my life. And now I have two kids at home that are young, that I want to be home with them. And I don't want to be missing the dance recitals and the Christmas concerts and everything else. So I just can't be gone as long. And what we find is that when dad has a hard time putting that ego aside of like, hey, I still want that tough, bad to the bone duck dog. But then the reality is I'm going to hunt 4 to 6 times a year because of my lifestyle and what it's going to be for the next 10 to 15 years. That's where we get into trouble, because that dog was purchased as, I'm a big motor fire breather, and now he's trying to babysit kids for 355 days a year. And so again, just being honest with yourself, what you're looking for.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, whether it's ego or influenced by friends or other, I think it is like you say, being like, what am I looking for? And then get the dog that best matches that, not, like you say, getting the most oddball dog that you can find or what your buddies have. It's what's your situation. I
Yeah,
could not agree more.
yeah, for sure. All right, so let's transition a little bit to first aid in the field, because this tends to be a very hot topic for people as they go into the field and they realize, hey, I may not be as educated as I would like to be, to where I can either, patch something up to get to where I need to be safe, or quite frankly, I have zero understanding of this at all, and I understand I'm putting my dog in a situation, that we could have something go on. So I'd like to kind of get your thoughts of, like, first aid in the field. Like, what is your go-to when you tell people, like, is there a certain kit, is there a certain knowledge base? And then I'd also love for you to dig into, because I think you have a fantastic program set up to help people educate themselves on this, because the reality is that as you're out in the middle of nowhere, South Dakota, and if something happens, like you're not dialing 911 and getting someone there, right? So it is on you. So if you could dig into that a little bit too, because I think that's fantastic.
Sure. So I think, I find that most owners fall into two categories, and it's, the owners that think that they're a field EMT surgeon and have, half of their deck system to, first aid items and fluids and sutures and basically like they have an ambulance on wheels. And then I think there's the other group that, go out into the field with hopes and prayers and thoughts that maybe they can find somebody on their cell phone should something bad happen. And I really encourage people to be in between. I'm not doing surgery in the field when something happens to my dog, and I certainly could. It's about stabilizing and getting to a more appropriate place, just like it would be with you or I. When the EMT show up, they're not repairing your fracture out in the field. They're going to stabilize you and get you to a more suitable facility. And so it's finding that middle ground of what do I need and can I do and should do out in the field, and then be equipped for that. I do on the website, so gundogdoc.com, I do have a free course of building a first aid kit. So it's 6 videos that come to your email inbox 6 days in a row that go over where I've broken it down into the tools that I recommend, the medications I recommend, um, wound care, and then what I carry on my person, like if I'm out west hunting where I'm going to be a ways from the truck, or what I'd probably have in my blind bag to your example, down in Arkansas where you're a 30-minute truck ride and a 15-minute walk. So that lighter kit, and it's not, it's not extensive. And so the problem I have with a lot of the, for sale kits is that they have a lot of fillers in them. I don't need 100 Q-tips or 500 Benadryls. I need the things I'm going to actually need, and it makes it tough to sell one of those that truly is like the kit that you should have. And that's, people ask, why don't you sell them? And it's because I believe in having quality content, but just like what you need. And so it'd be hard to put it together and quite frankly make margins on it. And so I'd rather share the knowledge and have people put it together themselves, because then if there's those consumables in it, so the gauze and the vet wrap and things like that, instead of having to buy an entire second kit to just replace a few items, you source the kit so then you can refill it with the things you run out of. And so I like people building their own kit so they know what the heck's in there and why it's in there. Um, On the education side, so on the what to do, we're in the process. We're probably 2 weeks away. We're recording this the first part of February. So before the end of February, we're going to have a course out that's going to be 60 plus videos of exactly this sort of content. So everything from doing the tailgate exam to what happens when you find debris in the eye, how do you flush the eye. I was fortunate to exchange some teaching at a university in exchange for using the surgery lab, and had access to cadaver dogs, where I was able to put together, I think it's 5 videos on laceration repair. I'm big on using the staple gun as opposed to sutures in the field, and so I'd go over how to close different lacerations using the stapler in the field. And then the stuff we've talked about, how to treat a heat stroke dog, what to look for with hypothermia, when a dog gets too cold, what we're looking for there. So kind of the gamut of both, these health issues and the injuries we cover in that video series, and that should be available in the next 2 weeks. So all the videos are shot, all the my end of it is done. It's now in the hands of the website people to get things up and going. So I think it is. It's one of those things that we need to. There's things that you can do and should do out in the field. Not every injury is we got to rush to a veterinarian. There's a number of things that you can do to start the healing process, and or to your point, there's times when there aren't veterinarians available. And so why wait a day or two until you get back home if there's things that you can start that dog on the healing process right away? And what I've found, and kind of the impetus for doing this, is over the years I've trained a lot of my clients on how to use the skin stapler and do things right. And things that were infected disasters on Monday, now these guys come in and the healing process is already 2 days into it, and a lot of those dogs were hunting the next weekend, as opposed to waiting for 2 weeks for this infection to get cleared up and the wounds to heal. And so I think taking an active role in your dog's healthcare is important, and it's not to replace veterinary care. It's to supplement it, and to get your dog the best care possible. And there are things you can do to be a part of that team, and I truly believe that.
Mm. Well, I think it's fantastic. I've got to have a little sneak peek to it myself, and one, I think I think you're giving it away for way too reasonable. Because this is going to save health, our vet visits. I mean, this is going to save people a lot of money in the long run from having this education. But then two, just the peace of mind that how can you put a price tag on your dog's life, right? So like the emergency situations, or what you're able to do in the field by yourself. And we live in a self-educated world, right? I mean, all of us
Right.
that are out in the field, we should have at least the base foundation of this. And of course, you go another layer through that, but we all should at least have a fundamental, I should say, I'm stuttering here today, fundamental idea of what to do if this happens, so that my dog and I can go home safe. Because at the end of the day, I think that's the number one priority that we all have, right? Like the birds are secondary, the gunshots are secondary, like the safety is certainly first and foremost. And I just think this does such a great job at providing people that self-education part.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's, the veterinary profession has changed a lot, since COVID. So many people got dogs, and we didn't produce more veterinarians. And so sometimes, there's a lot of even full-on emergency hospitals that are triaging cases away, where there's times you can't even get into a veterinarian with some of these sort of situations. And so having the tools to take care of it, I think, are vitally important, if as a profession we're not going to be able to fulfill that need sometimes, just because there's an overwhelming number of pet owners right now, and not an overwhelming number of veterinarians. And so having the ability to help your dog in those moments of need, I think, is vitally important.
Hmm. Yeah, for sure. For sure. Well, so I have one more topic I want to get into, and then you have to partake in our new thing here, which is our dog bowl questions. So we got to hang on to you for just a minute. But my last
Yeah.
question I want to ask you is, it's a comment that I've made on this show a few times now, and I have had people kind of ask a question on it. I think it's really interesting, and it's something that, quite frankly, I just haven't had the nerve to step away from yet. But we when it regards to puppies, I think way too often we hear, and this is one thing that people are looking for, is a health guarantee. And yeah, I know that you have looked at what we do, and very well the ins and outs of like what we're doing, why we're doing it, the health side of it. And you've made the comment that we should go away from providing health guarantees. And I think that's so interesting because it's been like this like standard. I'm using air quotes right now, standard for so long. But really, like, and I can give you my side of it after you kind of dig into your side of it. But I'd love to hear that side of it because I feel like there's a misconception there.
Yeah. Like you said, we've talked about it a lot, and I've always made the comment, if I was a breeder, there's no way I'd have a health guarantee. And the reason for that isn't because I don't believe in what the health guarantee is to achieve. So we'll put that out there right away. I do think that the kennels doing it right, like you guys are, still need to do all of the health clearances, which is different than the health guarantee, right? And so doing hips, doing elbows, doing eyes, with some of these other breeds, some of the genetic things that we can be doing, with the labs, EIC, CNM, I think those are all vitally important. But on the flip side of the puppy buyer that I see in the clinic, I feel like that health guarantee becomes that they no longer have the investment or idea that they're actually buying a living creature. And sometimes things go wrong even when we're doing things the best. And so to me, if I was in the breeding game, which thank God I'm not, if I was in the breeding game, I wouldn't have a health guarantee. I would say, here is everything we're doing to put the odds in your favor to get you a puppy that is as healthy as we can try to produce. And so, as you guys do, all the health clearances and sharing those with puppy buyers and things like that. Because what happens is that puppy goes home, and there is so much that an owner can do to screw up the health of that dog that's now out of your control and really has nothing to do with the genetics. And I think those are the problems that we end up seeing, and sometimes become part of that health guarantee, right? So you have that dog that received the wrong nutrition and it was over nutrition or incorrectly mineral balanced and develops things like OCD or hip problems, or the person had a dog that they allowed to jump out of the bed of the truck while it was a growing puppy. And now we have what looks like elbow dysplasia on x-rays, but it's just actually that it was this trauma that kept occurring during the growth of the dog. And so to me, there's just a bazillion things that an owner can do to cause the problems that would be potentially covered under a health guarantee. And I think they feel like it absolves, well, this dog had a health guarantee. It shouldn't matter what I did. It had a health guarantee, and it becomes, on the breeder to solve that problem that wasn't the breeder's fault. Um, and I don't think, because you're going to have that case, those times where there is something that was clearly, say, a congenital condition where, you have a puppy that had an issue that we couldn't help, but we didn't find it out until later in life. A good and honest breeder is going to take care of that with or without the health guarantee. It's the people that think that they're buying a flawless living creature that I think that you could, I don't want to say eliminate, but I think you're gonna get people thinking more when they buy this puppy that, just because there's a guarantee, you're buying, getting this pup at 8 to 10 weeks old, and there is a lot that you have to do to live up to that guarantee. And I think, the prevalence of health guarantees in the sporting dog world, and now, even the doodle world and the pet world, is that people think that there's just no investment on their part, like it's some sort of warranty on their TV, and if this dog suddenly has an issue now, we're just going to have warranty service, and that's not how it works. They're probably vastly more responsible for the health outcome of that dog than the genetics ever influence with the decisions they make. And I think that health guarantees, not in all cases, but in a number of cases, create poor puppy owners.
Mhm. Yeah, and I love that perspective because it does put the ownership, or at least some of the ownership. At least you have to look at yourself as the dog owner, right? Of like, I have to do my part, right? And from a
Right.
breeder standpoint, I know there have been a few times where we've had conversations like, oh my gosh, like really, but we've had times where we had somebody that, I mean, they openly told us, right? Like, well, this the dog fell off the retaining wall and got hurt and now shows up on this, but we need a refund. And it's like, like, well, it's in your guarantee. Well, I guess it is in our guarantee, and so we do it. But what it does for us, and I'm sure a lot of other breeders that are doing it right, like it takes a significant investment to do it right, to do all the health testing, to go through the process, and to get to whittle down to the right dogs and only breed the dogs that you feel like are the cream of the crop, to be able to pass on the right genetics and no dispositions and everything you're trying to go for. And then when that kind of stuff happens, again, small business, I mean, it hurts. I mean, it really hurts. And the quote unquote health guarantees that I see out there that breeders are putting out there, some, I'd say most of them are, well, you give the dog back and then we'll give you the refund. Well, why is that? Because they know that you're in love with this dog, you're not giving the dog back, right? I mean, at least in 98% of the cases. And so, so it is a tough one, and I want to so bad. I really do. Because of all these, and you get enough of the WTF moments of like, really, like, you're really gonna try to make us cover this, right? But like so many times now, like you said, like you can do everything right and something still go off, right? So like there are certainly times that are like, absolutely, we want to take care of this, we want to help you out, right? But it's a tough one because of this industry standard that seems to be out there, and it's something that I think we're going to fight. But I do think we want to move to this at some point. And with experts such as yourself that have that kind of insight, I think it helps us be able to know, hey, we're not doing this for any kind of a selfish reason. We're doing this because we believe that it truly is the right thing to do it, and this becomes now a two-way street. We're both committing ourselves to this puppy. Not like you said, the car warranty type of an approach on that.
Right, and I think it'll be an education process, right? Like exactly everything you just said is if breeders were to start going away from it, is the educate to say I'm actually more invested in this dog's health. I'm going to do everything I can, and here's the example of that. Here's all the data that I'm going to provide you that would go into a health guarantee. But now I need you to realize that you're buying a living creature and you need to live up to your side of this bargain once that 7-week-old puppy goes home with you. And I again, it's creating that mindset of that, like, there is responsibility on that puppy owner's part that I don't think that everybody appreciates. I think they think, I write that check and that's my part of the deal. I don't think they understand that they're now taking over responsibility for that living thing's growth and development. And it seems so common sensey and simple, but I think, like, the people that have one or two dogs throughout the course of a 20-year period, I think they have a different view sometimes, that they think they are in this world of, technology and quick fixes and everything. I think it's all, not that they don't appreciate and love it as a living thing, but I think it's a transactional thing that they think that, well, I bought this guarantee, that means that nothing will ever go wrong. And I think it's a mindset that needs to change, where people understand that, that might be the cheapest expense that you have in this dog was the initial purchase price, because that's what happens with living things sometimes. So
yeah, no doubt, no doubt. I love that part of it. That was fantastic. I wanted your intake on, or your take on that, because it's such a valuable thing from a critical thinking standpoint. As you are an owner going into this thing, that I think it's great to just, hey, I got to own this too, right? Like this is a two-way street, right. And I think that's fantastic. All right, so we don't keep you too terribly long. Let's get into our dog bowl questions. So Erin actually has picked out a couple of questions that she thinks fits us both. And so what we'll do is Erin can read this question, and then we can kind of both give our answer on it.
All right. Transitioning to puppies still a little bit. When do you switch puppies from puppy food to adult food?
Well, of course, that's one for the doctor right away. So go ahead.
Yeah. So I think, the one thing I would say is that I think people get so caught up in wanting to do that transition too early. the big thing, and I always think that they should have, and I did a podcast interview with Russ Kelly, that I think was a good one. That we talked about, like we should have probably renamed these diets like performance puppy as opposed to large breed puppy, because we are building an athlete, and that's the whole purpose of them, is to have slow and steady growth. And so to me, I always err on the side of feeding it as long as I can to make sure that the skeletal maturity is achieved. So, you know, we start talking a lab sized dog out in that 18-month ballpark is what I usually shoot for. The thing that might shift me with that would be if, I had a dog that was a little bit younger than that and I was trying to hunt it in the first season. But I also know that I'm talking with somebody that really advocates that red shirting a dog the first season. And so, a dog probably isn't going to be working so hard that they need to switch to a performance diet before that 18-month, particularly when we start talking duck dogs. If a setter or a pointer that's going to be chasing Western birds and things like that, that's a whole different story. But those dogs are also going to reach skeletal maturity sooner than most Labradors, and so we could make that switch to a more energy dense formula if we had to. And so I like to feed the puppy formulas to retrievers out into that 18-month ballpark is where I usually try to get to.
Hmm. Well, I have nothing else to add in there because I just do what Dr. Spoo tells me to do.
Exactly, yes. All right, next question. What is your favorite style of hunting?
Oh, this is a good one. So I'll jump in here first. So, we're fortunate enough to be able to hunt all over the country, and it's easy for me to say hunting in the woods because I think I've talked about this before, but I just don't think from a duck standpoint, I just don't think there's anything more intimate as far as waterfowling goes than watching a bird at 20 yards and in, the way they turn their head, the way they move their body, the way they use their feet, the way you just see everything in slow motion and so close. But the dog handler in me dislikes it because these retrieves are like 9-yard retrieves, right? It's like, well, I could just walk out there and grab it too. So I would say my absolute favorite tends to be, even though I'll take ducks over geese every day, all day long. When we get on those like mallard speckled belly combos, I just love it because my dogs end up getting stretched out so far. We can kind of apply our training more, and that tends to be probably my favorite. Dr. Spoo?
So, migrating ducks over cattail slough in this part of the country. And I think, honestly, it checks all of the boxes that you just talked about when it's right. Like when those birds come into a spread, but instead of them, coming through the treetops, you're seeing them sometimes miles away, talking to them, pulling them in with the call, get them to do it right over the decoys. And yes, you're going to have those tight retrieves, but inevitably you'll also have that wingtip bird or a sailor that dog's also doing a really long water retrieve. And so like for me, the migrating birds that want to do the decoys in a prairie pothole slough like that will be, if that's not in heaven, then I don't know if I want to go.
Well, you talked about from the hunting standpoint too, like these migrators and the communication and pulling them in, like that's a big part of it. Because as much as I love scouting and getting on the X and doing that whole thing, it's almost, to me, it's like, like there's a part of me that wishes as a archery hunter that I could go back to hunting without trail cams, right? Like just go out
Right.
because I want to be there and who knows what happens. And I feel like that's a little more, like hunting migrators, right? Like we don't know what this day is going to bring, but we know we're going to be in a good area. The weather's going to be right. And then the communication of like, hey, I did this. I pulled them here. I made them, I convinced them that they wanted to be here. I love that, because the hunter in me gets all excited about that. So I love that part of it.
Yeah, no, and that's where, and I just like I like to rib my versatile dog owning friends about, like I don't like to chase fur and our whole conversation there. I really, water hunting is frowned upon out here to a certain degree, and everybody field hunts. And I do think it's a little cheating, like you said. It's like if you have a feed and you set up on the X, you're gonna shoot birds versus, you you wake up after a cold front's come through overnight, and that marsh can be totally different than the day before because suddenly, like these birds came down on a north wind, and it's the mystique of it, like you said, where you're crafting the hunt as opposed to just inserting yourself where the ducks want to be. Man, there's just something about that in my world.
Uh, totally agree. And those big green heads, like you can't beat those big northern mallards. I love it. All right, Aaron, let's do one more.
Perfect. For the last one, how did you get into your profession and why did you choose this profession?
That I'll go first because I'm more interested in hearing Dr. Spoo's take on it because we heard that he's always wanted to be a vet, but I don't know if there was like a certain dog or something like that. For me, it was Easton, which is my first dog that I ever had, and quite frankly, he made it easy for me. And so because it was easy, I had more fun with it, and because he was successful, I had more fun with it. And I truly believe it was because of that dog that gave me not only the confidence but also the enthusiasm to go do this. Because one of the things that I did that I do believe is the right way to do it. Dr. Spoo and I laugh about how Instagram has made trainers overnight, and truly believe that's the wrong way to do this. Like, go get your feet wet, go put the work in, go learn what to do and what not to do. But that dog gave me the enthusiasm to want to go do it. I didn't come from a dog family, didn't come from, quite frankly, not even really like a waterfowling or upland family. So it was certainly that dog that got me into it, and probably continues to be my why. Like that energy that he gave me, and the pride that he gave me. There's something prideful about, you took this dog from this little puppy. Now we see the whole cycle of life, right? So we see literally this puppy's first breath on this earth, through putting him through bird and gun introduction and turning them on to what they love about life, and then turning them into now this proficient hunting dog. And now you get through the advanced stage, and now you get, and then the owner involvement, teaching the owner, training the trainer. I really think everything stems back to that dog for me. Dr. Spoo?
Yeah, so for me, I did grow up in a waterfowling. That's what Dad and I did all the time, but without a dog. And so like being a kid that wanted to be a veterinarian and loved hunting, like the only thing that I could want to do was I could not wait until I got out on my own. I could have my Chesapeake Bay Retriever, the quintessential waterfowl dog. Through school, I think like it's interesting that as you were talking about, with you and in Easton and stuff like that. Interestingly, I've kind of been examining that. My daughter, I love to read. Like I love to read. I have stacks and stacks of books everywhere. And my daughter is in third grade and hates to read, and so it's like a knife to my heart. And we may have found a commonality though because she's an animal lover and loves to hunt. I think it was dog books, honestly, like in that age, like from third grade through high school. So like, Jim Kilgard's Big Red series and, Call of the Wild and Where the Red Fern Grows. Like I can still remember, like when I get to the part of Where the Red Fern Grows that I wish I had known occurred in that book, um, going to my room and just bawling because of that connection. And so I think it was those reading in books of like how much of a team you could be with dogs that led me to want my own. I grew up hunting, but never had that hunting dog. And so um, I think that's probably where like the path to veterinary medicine and what I'm doing today was that combination. Like I wanted to be a vet. I loved hunting, and I saw this opportunity to like take care of these partners. And I always tell people like, you know, my skill level and knowledge with hunting dogs, is it's not for everybody else. It was so that I could be the best vet possible to my own dogs when I finally owned them. And my clients just get that benefit. So it was a very selfish thing. I just wanted to be the absolute best hunting dog veterinarian I could be because of the dogs that I have owned, will own, and wanted to own, before I became that. So the moment, like, I my would have been 4th year of school, 2nd year of vet school, when I could get, I was in the dorms the first 2 years of undergrad, and then I got into vet school. I lived in the dumpiest of dumps through vet school just so that I could have that Chesapeake Bay Retriever. And same, like I took her from a puppy. Her faults, her greatness was all my doing. And the good and the bad, it was that pride of like we were a team, and from that moment on, it was how can I expand my knowledge so I can live up to my end of the bargain from the health standpoint with that teammate.
Hmm. Well, I think it's pretty safe to say that you lived up to being the best vet that you could be, man. Because there's no one that I respect more, than you in this industry, and I can't thank you enough for everything that you've done and continue to do for Whitney and I, and quite frankly everybody here at Riverstone or Retriever Roadmap. You've just been such a great person, but a great asset to everybody. So we can't thank you enough for that.
I appreciate that greatly. You have no idea how much that means to me.
Yeah, well, and just so you know, I had the same exact situation happen with Where the Red Fern Grows, to the point that I never could watch the movie, like because I knew
I can't
Old Dan, Little Ann, like I
either.
just I couldn't do it.
Nope,
I couldn't do it.
I've never picked the book up again either, and I hesitate, like with Grace, like I want to read it with her to kind of see how, but there's part of me that doesn't, because like it was so devastating to me, and I've never watched the movie as well.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. Well, before we let you go, could you let everybody know where they can find more about you, but then specifically your program coming out?
Sure. So on Instagram is probably where I'm most active, and that's at GundogDoc. The website is gundogdoc.com. If you're interested in the first aid kit course, you hit the courses, you can sign up for that. And like I said, there's no cost to the first aid kit course. It's 6 emails with videos of me talking you through that. And then if you're interested in the field emergency and first aid course, there's a tab for that as well, and you can sign up for the newsletter. And then once that's ready to go live, you'll be notified of that via the newsletter. I will put a plug in too, if this is going to air in the next couple of weeks, that I'll be at Pheasant Fest as well, and we'll have some giveaways associated with the course and signing up for the newsletter. I'll have a booth at Pheasant Fest, and then I'm also presenting a 4-hour field emergency and first aid course for Pheasants Forever at Pheasant Fest. So
that's fantastic. Well, certainly a wealth of knowledge, my friend. I thank you so much for spending time out of your busy schedule to come do this here with us, and I cannot wait to talk to you again, because I have like 20 more questions here that we didn't get to, so I'll have to do it again at some point. But in the meantime,
Perfect.
man, thank you so much for everything, and hopefully we can talk again soon.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right, guys, that was Dr. Joe Spoo, the Gun Dog Doc. Make sure you go check him out, and man, I cannot recommend going through his field emergency course enough, just because, again, we're all out there doing this, you guys. Like we owe it to our dogs to have a level of expertise when it comes to, like, we're not trying to be Dr. Spoo, right? But we do, I believe, owe it to our dogs to have some level of competency when it's, hey, we're putting you in the field. If something happens, how do we get you to where we need to get you safely? But then also, guys, I promise you, this will save you money in the long run with vet visits and everything else. So highly recommend that. If I don't get a message from you guys, we continue to stack up the dog bowl questions with Aaron. So if you guys have questions, make sure to send that stuff in. I'm going to be heading back to the pheasant ranch here in the next couple days, and likely going to be doing a few recordings from down there. So you'll have to stay in touch with us as we head back south. So I hope everyone out there has a fantastic rest of your week, and we'll talk again soon. Thanks for listening. Be sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram. Leave us a review on iTunes, and a special thank you to Eukanuba, because without them, we couldn't do what we do here, bringing this information to you.